Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's go. Here we go, you guys. Another big time episode featuring a big time guest. My man Colin Boyd is in the house. And let me give you a little backstory on Colin here. So, Colin is the guy that you go to when you want your presentation to get clients, not just claps. He's advised some of the biggest names in the industry to speak and sell from both virtual and live stages, including Amy Porterfield, Rick Mulready, Julie Solomon, Kerry Green, and hundreds of other entrepreneurs around the world. Colin is a certified speaking professional who has been on the professional speaking circuit for over a decade and with corporate clients including Coca-Cola, Suncorp, Fuji Xerox, and Hewlett-Packard. He's best known for his signature program called Sell from Stage Academy, which helps people turn everyday presentations into a money-making machine. He currently lives in Newport Beach, California with his wife and two little kids. Colin, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Jake.
Dude, so we were just chatting, beforehand and talking about different tools and different techniques and people. And one of the things that I think is so cool about this industry and the thing that you do is everything comes down to our ability to connect, our ability to communicate, our ability to share a story. So how did you become the story guy? How did you become the guy who is all focused on presentations and producing results from those?
I know for me, when I first was starting out in my business, obviously I was where everyone starts at the beginning with no clients. And so I'm sitting in my 2-bedroom apartment. I've got this old desk with no legs on it on the side, and it was held up by phone books because I grabbed it from the $2 store down the road. And this is when I was living in Australia. And I remember looking at my calendar and I had really nothing on. In fact, I had like half a client, if you can have that, because they would turn up every other month and kind of pay me like every other month. And so I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is not sustainable. And then what happened was I got a call on my landline. That was back in the day when we had landlines. And my buddy goes, hey, I've got a presentation coming up that I can't do. It's a free presentation. Would you like to go and speak at it? And I'd never spoken before. I was really kind of nervous about it. And I said, sure, I'll do it. And one of my beliefs is that whatever shows up in your world, if it's aligned with your purpose, you're ready. You are ready for it. Whether you think you're ready for it or not, you are ready for it if it shows up. And so I said yes. I went and spoke. It was literally a dark and stormy night. I remember walking up the stairs. The event organizer runs to me. He's like, Colin, biggest night we've ever had in our history of events. And in my mind, that's bad news because I'm just thinking, great, there's just going to be more people who are going to think I'm an idiot. And so I presented, I made an offer at the end, and I didn't realize it was an irresistible offer. And out of the 137 people, there was like 125 gave me their details. I followed up. I ended up signing about 12 full-time like weekly coaching clients from there. So my coaching business, when I was doing life coaching back in the day, went from 0 to like full overnight. And then HP, Hewlett Packard, called me 4 days later and asked me to speak at their next global training day, which ended up having 5,500 people at it. That was my first paid gig. And I worked with HP around the world for like 10 years. And so for me, this revelation, this experience was that in my expert business, that just the power of a presentation. And I know, if you're an author, like, a lot of authors use their book to get presentations, or they'll sell their books on the back end. And just for me, like that combination of taking great IP and turning that into a presentation can change your business.
What a way to get this episode rocking and rolling. Like there were a lot of good things here, but one of the things that I always think about when I'm doing speaking, because a lot of people are nervous about it, right? They're fearful of it. And I always remind myself, nobody knows what I'm going to say except for me. And so the only way they'll ever know if I forget an entire 7-minute segment of my presentation is if I give the body language that I messed up, right? And so as you're talking about that, I'm like, okay, a lot of people can relate to, oh shoot, there's more people. That's bad news to me. But you turn this first presentation, and I want to make note, this was a free presentation that you did, and you turned that into a 80 to 90% opt-in rate and a 10 to 12% conversion rate. Those numbers are unbelievable, which is no wonder why this has become your go-to thing. So talk to me. What makes a presentation get you clients versus just claps? Because claps are great for the ego, but they don't do anything for the bank account, right? They don't do anything for moving the needle in the business. So what's the secret sauce here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of my clients, his name's Gary. He came to me, and and this happens a lot, is they've done some speaking gigs before, they've ran some webinars before, and they get great ratings, they get, really nice comments. But if they make an offer, or they don't make an offer, but it just never leads to the next thing. It's like they get the highest rating, but it doesn't lead to the next thing. And one of the biggest differences is that a lot of people learn to speak to entertain, but they don't learn to speak to get their audience to commit on the next level. And so for me, the difference is that most people see it as two separate things. They see speaking like as education, as in creating enthusiasm, contribution, all that sort of stuff. And then they see selling as, kind of taking money off people. So usually something negative, being pushy, all that sort of stuff. And so for me, I like to bring them together, which is what I call infusion selling. And infusion selling is the idea of speaking and selling at the same time. And so how that works is that whether someone buys from you or not, which is what we call a sharp sell is where you do a direct offer on the end of it. Whether someone buys from you or not, they always walk away and go, that was a great presentation. Like, that was phenomenal. And I feel more motivated. But really at the core of it is realizing that you have to align a presentation with, first of all, the core, we call the core premise, which is the main idea that the audience has to believe to say yes to your offer. We have to align the presentation to that. And then secondly, we have to make sure that the presentation is built to generate greater levels of commitment, as opposed to just to like educate them on content.
Wow. So when you're doing that, right? We got the core premise, we got the different types of selling, we got this concept though that people are like, "Oh, I'm speaking or I'm selling." What is the easiest way for someone to start to feel good about infusion and really bringing that together so that they don't see it as two separate things, but they do see it the way you describe it? Because that's a mental shift.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think one of the biggest shifts people have to make is they have to shift their perspective of what selling is. And most people don't want to be a salesperson, or they don't want to be the salesy individual. And that's because they've had a bad experience of selling. But when you think about it, when you make an offer to your audience, essentially all you're doing is you're welcoming them, you're asking them whether they would like to enter a new level, a new space of transformation. I call it a sacred place of transformation. And so for me, in our program, for you in your program, if someone joins your program, essentially what they're doing is they're saying, I am willing to commit at a greater level to myself, and with the potential of reaching the outcome that I actually want myself. Like this, the client has to want it themselves, right? You're not getting them to do something they don't want to do. All they're doing is going, I'm moving from one level of commitment, maybe it's a 1 out of 10, right? They're in the research mode, and they're going, I want to move to like a 7 or 8 or a 9 or a 10 out of 10, depending on the commitment level. And so essentially selling is really just inviting people to enter a space on their own decision, enter a space of a greater level of transformation and commitment to themselves. And that to me is actually a beautiful integrate exchange. And so if people have a hang up around asking for money, don't think about it as asking for money. You're actually just asking for them to commit to themselves, and money is simply a currency of that commitment. There's also time, there is attention, there is effort, there is confidentiality. Like there's so many different currencies of that commitment, and money is just one of them. And think about it like it's like a wall. So the more commitment you're asking, the more sacred the place becomes in your offer. So a $7 membership, you're going to have a whole bunch of people at various levels of commitment, but a $50,000 mastermind, you're going to have people who are very committed to the outcome, greater levels of confidentiality, greater levels of focus, of energy. And so it just becomes more sacred, the place. And so rather than thinking about it as, oh, I'm just taking more money from people, think about it as, no, I'm just creating a bigger barrier for people to commit to themselves at a greater level on the outcome they already want.
Oh, I like that. I like that, Colin. I have a different viewpoint on it that ends up at the same result. And I think of it as like, you mentioned the word inviting. I always tell people, like, think of selling as you're inviting them to step into the result they want, right? You're inviting them to a party. And your party is the best party they've ever been invited to. It's going to have the best drinks, the best entertainment, the best outfits, the best literally snacks. I'm a snack guy, so it's going to have everything. And all they have to do is say yes, right? Because nobody ever got upset being invited to a party. And the better the party is, or the more celebrities that are going to be there, the more likely they want to say yes, right? And so I think it's such a great way to frame that when it comes to getting your mindset right around selling and really combining that with what you're doing as a speaker on stage. And as we talk about this, right? As we talk about these mindset shifts around selling, as around really being infused with each other, what are the different types of presentations that are really working in today's economy? What are the types of presentations that authors or entrepreneurs or experts should really be striving to be giving?
Well, for me, there's three types of presentations. There is a sharp sell, which is a direct offer. So you're usually going to do something like that on a webinar that you're running yourself. Maybe you've got permission to speak at an event and you're allowed to sell. I know for me, that's where I kind of cut my teeth. The thing that changed my life in this world, because I didn't teach speaking for 10 years. So I didn't used to teach. I've only been teaching speaking and selling from stage essentially for about 3.5 years, but I was doing it for 10 years. And so what happened was I was a couple of years into my career and I got asked to speak at an event and it was a 30-minute keynote. And I asked the guy, I've got an offer that aligns with the topic. Would it be okay if we make an offer to the audience? And he liked the idea and we actually created like a partnership in the offer and we just did like a 50-50 partnership. And I said, great, that sounds great. And so he paid me my keynote fee, which was a couple of $1,000. And I spoke and then we made an offer together and we ended up doing about $120,000 in 30 minutes. And I remember just thinking this was the first time I ever like properly sold from the stage. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I know I did a 50-50 split on it, but I'm like, I just made, 20 times my keynote fee in, in like 30 minutes of and I just left that money on the table. And so one of the things is to realize that you're always leaving money on the table. And obviously there's the right context to do that. So that's what we call a sharp sell. The second one's a soft sell, which is, and that happens a lot. I just did a coaching session with a client yesterday who's speaking at an association, and a soft sell is essentially like they download a PDF or they download something valuable in exchange for their personal details. And then you follow up. That's what I did at that first speaking event. It was a soft sell. I made an offer, they gave me their details, I followed up, and then you can, join your programs after that. And then there's the no sell, which is like the classic keynote, which is you speak, there's no offer. You actually are looking for claps, but what you're looking for usually is people to come up to you or contact you after and to go, hey, how do we take that next step? And when it comes down to it, for all of these presentations, they're really just one presentation with different endings a lot of the time. And so the way to think about it is to not just go, what content can I teach that will wow the audience or make me look really smart and sophisticated? You need to think, what does the audience need to understand about this topic so that they can make a greater commitment to themselves in this topic, and also create a greater desire to see a change in this topic. And also the biggest one is, what resistances do they have around committing to this topic? And those need to be addressed. And I know for me, a lot of the times, the time spent on the beliefs that people have about your topic is just as important as the content or the ultimately offer at the end. So that's, the three types of talks, and then also like a little bit about some of the structure of the content.
This is really, really important for people to recognize that depending on where you're at, what type of presentation it is, you're going to have a different type of close. And it's really important to recognize that you can do all of them in different scenarios, but throughout every single one, there has to be a story of you and building your authority, building your credibility, building your journey, building something about yourself that helps the listener, the viewer, the live attendee feel that you are the best person to be teaching on this. And so how do you help people when they get ready to actually craft their talk and they get ready to do one of these, regardless of the ending? Is there a story that we need to be telling? Is there an approach we need to be doing in the beginning? Is there a setup? What do we need to really focus on to build that trust early on with the audience?
Mm. So my take on this is, most people teach to share your origin story, and so most people, when they lead with a story, because you definitely should share your story in the first, 7 minutes of the presentation, 7 to 10 minutes. Most people tell the wrong story. So the story they tell is maybe a little bit about where they grew up, why they got into business. And it's kind of a lot of the time it's mix, it's mix and match. It's like they tell a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And, I've been studying this topic for this long, and they're trying to share a little bit about their life, maybe their family, and then a little bit about their credentials to, build some trust. And so it's a little bit all over the place, and it has like a timeline that they go through. Now that's okay, but really the main person who's going to be interested is their mum, and their mum is probably not in the audience. And so that's nice to know a little bit of information about them. But the story you should share that I teach is what's called the conversion story. And the conversion story is built all around usually one of the first experiences that you had of the vehicle that you help people with. And so, for example, when you asked me, like, how'd you get into this? Like, I honestly could have shared about 20 different stories. I could have shared the story about how my youth leader suggested that I should go and study life coaching. I could tell a story about how my coach at the time called me a schmuck I call that my schmuck story, for not stepping up into my business. Like there's so many different like stories I could share, but I shared the story that would articulate the transformation that I help people with. And so that's called your conversion story. And the purpose of your conversion story, there's two folds. One of the purposes, there's two questions we need to answer with our story. And the first question is, are you like me? So the first question is, are you like me? The audience has to go, this person on some level is like me. And not like you as in, the same demographics or the same experiences. I mean, like you as in the internal experiences, the struggles, the challenges that they've experienced. So that's the first question that they have to answer. They have to go, this person's like me, because they have to see themselves in your story. And then the second part is, the question is, can they lead me? And so that leads into the authority piece of it. And you have to, in your story, show that you've achieved something, you've grown, you've developed some mastery, where they can trust you in terms of the process, because most people don't want to make that decision over and over again of, can I trust you? And so in your story, you have to really start to embed that of, I'm just like you, but I can also lead you. Mm. And so people see themselves in your story. And if you do that properly, and then you align it with the core premise, you can create a conversion story that you can share on podcasts, in your books, in presentations, webinars, like so many platforms you can share a conversion story on.
Is there a place that you have, maybe it's a resource that we can learn how to do our conversion story? Because this is something that takes time, and you want to practice it, and you want to try different things, and you want to experiment and test it, and ultimately get better at it. Do you have a resource or any place where we could like learn more about that?
Yeah. So probably the best place to go is conversionstoryformula.com. So conversionstoryformula.com essentially is where you can get access to that exact process. And basically my goal is to get someone's conversion story completed in 48 hours, so that within 48 hours, the next afternoon, they have their conversion story ready to share on a Facebook Live. Like for me, I'm not thinking like months. I'm like tomorrow afternoon. If you work on this for an hour or so, tomorrow afternoon you'll have it.
That's what's
Um,
up.
yeah, that's the goal.
That's what's up. That's what's up. So, all right. When you are talking about this, it feels so natural. Like you're just a good dude, man. Like you're talking about it, and I'm thinking as you're asking me, do they like me? Can they lead me? And I'm listening to you talk, and I'm answering those questions. As you're asking those questions, I'm answering them, right? And I think that this is something so cool about how you've built your business and how you've achieved so much success. You spoke for 10 years. You put in the hours, you had results doing something, and now you're teaching those things. Unfortunately, in this industry, in the online business industry, we're seeing a lot of people who go to one Tony Robbins seminar and then think they're the greatest life coach ever, or they read one book and they think they're an expert on that. And I don't want to discredit people out there that are hustling, trying to make things happen, because you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But when you come across people like yourself who put the work in for 10 plus years, had success, made a career, made a living, went through the ups and downs, you know what you're talking about so good. You know exactly what it takes, and you continue to improve. You're always learning here.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you this, because a lot of people, when it comes to presenting or conversion stories or selling or trying to just figure out how in the world am I supposed to even get these, there's so many different things to do. Where should somebody start if they are trying to, let's say they're an author, and they want to really start to build out their brand, they want to find more high ticket clients based on their book. What is the starting place for somebody to get booked on stages, to give presentations, to practice the conversion, to learn the selling techniques? What are the things that they could do like right after they listen to this episode?
Well, obviously, your conversion story, getting clear on that will make you a lot more confident in sharing your content, because that conversion story aligns with everything, all the content you're going to share after that. And also getting clear on your core premise, which is part of the conversion story formula. So that's the first bit. But really, I know for me, it's exactly what you said. It's putting in the reps. It's doing it over and over again. And I have ran, I mean, there may not be 1,000, but it's, close to 1,000 webinars, I would say. Like literally just, I've decided on a date, I promoted to an audience before I even had an audience, and I run a webinar with like one person on there, two people on there when I first started. And so for me, I think it's about just getting some reps up. And so whether that be, I think live streaming is the fastest way to do it. Jumping on a live stream, I think, whether it's doing videos and then putting them on YouTube, or running your own webinar. Like a lot of my students, just the other day, we had a student and she had never made an offer before, like never actually pitched an offer. And she works with artists like painters to help them to get publicity. She had a lot of publicity in the past. And she ran just like a Zoom meeting, and she ran it inside of a Facebook group for like 5 days and just talked about her process. And then she made an offer for a beta program, and she did $73,000 in that first week. And I was like, I mean, that's insane, right? But really when it came down to it, it was that they had beautiful connection and trust with her, and she'd done the work. She'd actually done something, and then she just presented what she'd done and then said, hey, can I help you? I'll help you implement it. And so I think if you're still like learning that process, you're still getting your reps in, that's totally fine. Like that's where I started. That was part of the journey. And when I started coaching, when I started taking on clients, I did it for free, to be honest. Like I would have like 10 or 12 free coaching clients. So even when I said, with my story, I had one paying client, but I had a whole bunch of free clients as well. So like I would have just free clients taken on. And so for me, like doing those reps is really important. It helps with your confidence in terms of what you sell and stuff like that as well. But I think the easiest way to start is the lowest barrier to entry. A Facebook Live, a webinar. A webinar is a bit more official, but I think that really teaches you the process, or doing some videos.
Do you have a internal ranking system of what medium or what delivery method is the best? Meaning, Facebook Live, Instagram Live, webinars, podcast, on stage, virtual stage, big conference, small conference, guest coaching. Do you have a ranking system for you that you find clients really like to do, or that you've seen a lot of success with?
Yeah. So I would say fastest to conversion would be speaking in someone else's program, because you're speaking to a group who are buyers. So if you can speak to any group coaching program, I've done a lot of that where I'll be like a guest speaker. Like we just did a little while ago, Kerry Green's Female Entrepreneur Association. I was like the speaker for the month. And we've had like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of leads from that, right? Who have turned into clients. And so that for me is really a valuable way. I think from the greatest conversion perspective, a live presentation, like in person, nothing beats that. But the problem is we've got COVID, we've got travel restrictions, all that sort of stuff. Although a lot of people are starting to run live stuff now, so it's definitely still happening. But a live presentation, like your conversion rates are going to be, if you do it right, it's going to be anywhere between 20% to 50% into a product that could be $5,000 or higher. So like the conversions on that is incredible. The next level down from that would probably be like a webinar. I would say, like you have a specific time, a specific date, and then you declare it for that. Yeah, that's for me, I would say, like the most powerful in terms of getting clients, building credibility. And I like the one where you're a featured speaker or something like that, because you get the credibility of the person introducing you, and then you also get in front of buyers who are ready to buy.
Dude, that right there, if anyone's listening and you're thinking, okay, what's the fastest way for me to achieve success? Maybe you've just written your book and you're like, okay, now I need to go get the clients, or maybe you've had a business and you want to take it to the next level. If you re-listen to those last 2 minutes, you will know exactly what path you need to take, where you should be putting your outreach efforts, and how to move forward quickly. Of course, while practicing your conversion story, right? So, Colin.
And I was going to say as well, like, you got to start with where you're at, because I mentioned, I spoke for Kerry Green's association. She's got like thousands and thousands of members. Like, it's huge. But I didn't start there. Like, I started speaking at, groups that had like 3 people in them. Right. So you just start with the level that you're up to and the connections you have. And then from those connections, then you get referred into other groups and stuff like that. So think about it as like a 12-month journey, that within 12 months, you can go from like base level groups to super high level groups. And that for me was the journey with it.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because I remember those days too, when I did the speaking engagement for the local freaking business networking meetup group,
100%.
5 people, and I'm like, what am I doing here, right? And then it's evolved to filling up theaters, speaking in auditoriums, speaking to a small group of people that have invested a ton, so they're ready to buy. You just need to put something in front of them, right? So there's all these different ways, but I think you do make a really great point of, you got to start where you're at. Right. And I think something that a lot of people do is they look to the people that they're watching on social media, and they're like, oh, I need to be doing what they're doing. But meanwhile, you forget that they've been doing that for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 5 years, 3 years. But they've been doing it consistently over and over and over again. And so we have to remember, you start with what you got, you start with where you're at, and you take one step forward in the right direction. And eventually you start to create that snowball, you start to create that network, you start to create that opportunity for yourself. So I'm so glad you jumped in there and said that, because I think it's such a valuable lesson that we can all take away and apply.
Yeah, I love it. And I think, like, when it comes down to it, the journey that you're on is learning to be really competent at what you're doing, but also keeping your vulnerability in the journey, and that keeps that connection. And so for me, it's the blend of showing your audience that you're really good at what you do, but also being personable. And that's what makes someone attractive, and would want you to work with them.
Okay, before we wrap this up, I have one question on that topic here, and that's this. I find, and I've struggled with this myself, but I find this: how do you keep yourself being seen as the expert in something while also sharing that vulnerability and growth along the way. Because what happens is it's like, I need people to see me as the go-to person, right? I need them to know that I have the answers. I can help them. I can solve their problem. But on the other side, it's like, I want to share part of my story. But if I share part of my story and it makes me look like I'm not competent at what I do, then they're going to be like, well, does he know it or does he not know it? So how do you navigate between the vulnerability of what's really happening for all of us with the fact of being that expert and go-to person?
Mm. Well, I mean, it makes it easier when you actually have results, obviously. Like, you know, so I can totally, but I can appreciate that some people, which is exactly where I was, is like you're on that start of the journey. And so I think at the start, it's like sharing the small wins. Like if you have a win with a client, like I would make a big deal of it, right? So I would share it publicly on social media, obviously get their approval, but share it on, like share it in your email list. If you can feature some results that you're seeing with clients, even if they're free clients, like no one knows, you feature some of those results, it builds your credibility. I think really it's kind of like it is a bit of a balancing act, because then what will tend to happen is people will either be on one side of the spectrum. So they'll be very high on the credibility, but they're holding, their kimono too tight. And so no one can see in, people don't feel connected to them. They come across a little bit egotistical, and there's a little bit of repulsion in that, I think. And then you've got the other side, which is someone who's just like giving it a go. They're on their way, they're just putting it out there. They're still discovering their craft, but there's something likable about that. And so I think that, it's on this journey. I've seen people go from that, like that likable, to the credibility too hard, and then they become repulsive. So it's like on your journey, on the listener's journey, in that is like, I think feature wins that you've got, right? And it's not ego if it's real. So if it's real, that's not egotistical. But I think that's that whole conversion story piece, is going like, you actually share the piece of like, I'm like you, I've got the same challenges, difficulties, uncertainties and worries as you. And I can also lead you because I've achieved this stuff despite those challenges. And so, yeah, that is a bit of a balancing act. And I do always look at people's brands and go like, do they need more credibility or do they need more vulnerability? And if you can get that blend right, it creates irresistibility.
I love that. A lot of itties at the end of that. All right, words, which is great. But it's interesting too. And if you take a step back and look at some of these industries, you'll notice some of these industries tend to have more cohesive communities, more loyal communities, and it's because those people that are leading those communities have a great formula, like you just talked about, right? With that credibility and the vulnerability, creating the irresistibility. So, dude, we could talk all day long about this stuff. This stuff is so good. I get geeked up talking about this because I'm like, how do we play
It's
the
fun.
game? Right? I love it. So, how do we? You already shared the conversion story, but tell us that link again, and then how do we listen to your podcast where you're giving tips? How do we connect with you? How do we continue to learn from you?
Yeah. So I run a podcast, which is called the Expert Edge podcast. You can just search that up, the Expert Edge. And yeah, like I said, I think the best, if people are really serious about getting started with a conversion story, the best place to go is conversionstoryformula.com. And that shows you like the exact process to follow to get your conversion story in the next 48 hours. And then you can start using it right away.
I love it. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've had a blast. I've learned a lot. I always learn a lot every time we talk. I always smile. I always feel good about myself and where I'm going, because you make it feel doable. And I really appreciate that from you. And for everyone that's listening, if you enjoyed this, grab a screenshot, tag us on the gram, tag us wherever. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We're always looking to improve our stories, right? And continue to get better. So if you enjoyed this, have some fun with it, share us. We'd love to connect with you. And thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your attention. And Colin, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Jack.
All right, everybody, we'll see you on the next one. Peace.